Detroit's most beloved amusement park wasn't in Detroit. It wasn't even in the United States. It sat on a Canadian island in the Detroit River. But for generations of Detroiters, Boblo belonged to us. You didn't simply drive into a parking lot and walk through a gate. You boarded a floating palace at the foot of Woodward Avenue and sailed toward another world. But in 1945, one young black woman was told that world was not open to her. Her response would help carry Boblo all the way to the United States Supreme Court. And less than 50 years later, the boats stopped, the rides disappeared, and an entire Detroit summer tradition came to an end. This is how Detroit found Boblo Island and how we lost it. Welcome back to Streets of History. I'm Chris Hubble with History Loves Company. And today, we're following Detroit history across an international border to the island that generations knew simply as Boblo. Its actual name is Bois Blanc, French for white woods, a reference to the white birch trees once found here. Boblo was simply the name that generations of Detroiters gave it. The island sits near Amherst, Ontario, where the Detroit River reaches Lake Erie. And long before the roller coasters, midway games, and ferry crowds, this was a strategic military location. During the 1830s, a limestone lighthouse and several defensive blockhouses were constructed on the island. One blockhouse and the remains of the lighthouse still survive today. But by the end of the 19th century, the island was about to exchange military defenses for something entirely different: Detroit recreation. In 1898, the Detroit, Belle Isle, and Windsor Ferry Company began developing part of Bois Blanc as a summer destination. At first, Boblo was less of an amusement park and more of an escape. There were beaches, picnic grounds, athletic fields, a bicycle track, and a carousel. At a time when Detroit was becoming louder, denser, and increasingly industrial, Boblo offered trees, water, and open space. The park was in Canada, but its audience was being built in Detroit. The greatest ride at Boblo wasn't located on the island. It was the journey there. Passengers boarded near the foot of Woodward Avenue, close to where Hart Plaza stands today. Then came the whistle. The ropes were released, and the city slowly began to fall away. The approximately 20-mile trip took about 80 minutes, carrying passengers past factories, freighters, and riverfront communities before finally reaching the island. The first of Boblo's two legendary excursion steamers was the SS Columbia, launched in 1902. 8 years later, she was joined by the SS St. Clair. Both were designed by renowned naval architect Frank E. Kirby. The Columbia was more than 200 feet long and was originally built to carry thousands of passengers. Its interior featured mahogany, leaded glass, gilded details, and a ballroom. These were not ordinary ferries. They were floating entertainment palaces. Children watched the massive machinery turn inside the engine room. Music played aboard the boats. People danced. Families ate together. Teenagers wandered the decks. You could feel the excitement building with every mile. Boblo understood something that modern entertainment destinations still try to recreate. The experience should begin before you arrive. But the freedom and possibility represented by those boats were not offered equally to everyone.
This isn't just another real estate platform. This is something different. A place where every property has a story. Search with ease, but discover more than just location and price. Every space comes with context, history, and identity. You don't just see a home, you understand it. Want to sell? Create a listing that stands out by telling what makes your place unique. Save, share, and connect with people who value more than just square footage. We don't just sell homes. We take care of preserving and telling their story. Because every home has a story, let's discover yours. History loves company.
On June 21st, 1945, Sarah Elizabeth Ray boarded the Columbia with classmates from Commerce High School. She had paid 85 cents for a round-trip ticket. She passed through the gate. She boarded the boat, and then company employees approached her. Sarah was told she could not travel to Boblo because she was black. At first, she refused to leave, but when it became clear that she might be removed by force, she walked off the boat. She refused the company's attempted refund, recorded the employee's name, and contacted the NAACP. Sarah did not allow the company to make the incident disappear. The Boblo Excursion Company argued that because its boats crossed into Canada, its operations were part of foreign commerce and Michigan civil rights law could not be enforced against it. The legal battle eventually reached the United States Supreme Court. Thurgood Marshall worked on Sarah's behalf through the NAACP Legal Defense Fund. In 1948, the Supreme Court upheld the company's conviction and affirmed Michigan's authority to apply its civil rights protections to the Boblo boats. A decade before Rosa Parks refused to surrender her seat on a Montgomery bus, Sarah Elizabeth Ray had taken her own stand on the Detroit River. This part of Boblo's story matters, because nostalgia can make the past appear simpler than it really was. Boblo created joy for millions of people, but there was also a time when the company deliberately decided who was permitted to experience that joy. Sarah Ray forced that to change, and she deserves to be remembered as part of both Detroit history and American civil rights history. As the decades passed, Boblo grew from a picnic destination into a full-scale amusement park. One of its defining structures was the enormous dance pavilion, built in 1913. Designed by Detroit architect John Scott and associated with financial backing from Henry Ford, it was the largest dance pavilion in North America until 1925. Thousands of people could gather beneath its roof. Big bands played here. Couples met here. First dates became marriages, and ordinary summer evenings became family stories that survived for generations. Then there were the rides, the wild moose, the whip, the tilt-a-whirl, the dodging cars, the swan boats, the miniature railroad circling the park. Later generations remember the screamer, the sky streak, the nightmare, the falling star, and the log flume. But Boblo's importance cannot be measured by a list of attractions. The park mattered because of what happened around them. It was the parent who finally agreed to ride the roller coaster, the teenager experiencing a first date, the child staring through the ferry railing at the water below, the auto worker spending a summer afternoon with his family after another week inside the factory. Those moments are what transformed Boblo from a business into a Detroit institution. And this is where I want your help preserving the story. Don't only tell me that you remember Boblo. Tell me which boat you rode. Tell me your favorite attraction. Tell me who took you, and approximately what year it was. Because those details are not simply comments. Together, they become a community archive. Boblo did not collapse because of one single event. Its decline happened gradually. By the 1980s, many attractions were aging. Competition for family entertainment had increased. Maintenance and transportation were expensive. Ownership changed, debts accumulated, and the park struggled to reinvent itself for a new generation. Then Boblo lost the thing that had connected it most directly to Detroit. The Columbia and St. Clair made their final Boblo run in September of 1991. Smaller ferries continued serving the island, but the grand downtown journey was over. In practical terms, Boblo had lost its front door to Detroit. Without the boats, Boblo wasn't quite the same experience. The park continued through the 1992 and 1993 seasons, but on September 30th, 1993, Boblo Island Amusement Park closed. The rides were dismantled and sold. Some were relocated to other amusement parks. The elaborate carousel, with its horses, goats, and deer, was sold for more than $1 million. Boblo wasn't erased in one dramatic moment. It was taken apart, piece by piece. Boblo wasn't erased in one dramatic moment. It was taken apart, piece by piece. And for Detroiters who had assumed that it would always be there, its disappearance was difficult to understand. No more crowds gathering downtown. No more whistles echoing along the river. No more children watching the island appear in the distance. A tradition that had survived 2 world wars, the Great Depression, and nearly a century of change was suddenly over. Boblo Island is primarily a residential community. The roller coasters, Midway, and Ferris wheel are gone. More than 150 houses, condominiums, and townhouses had been constructed by 2023, with additional development planned. But scattered remnants of the amusement park remain, including the dance hall, theater, former bumper car building, powerhouse, and portions of the old dock infrastructure. At the southern end of the island, the 1836 lighthouse and surviving blockhouse connect Boblo to a history that began long before the amusement park, and the boats have followed separate, uncertain paths. The Columbia was moved from Michigan to Buffalo as part of a proposed restoration effort. The St. Clair remained in the Detroit area but suffered a devastating fire in 2018 that destroyed much of its historic wooden upper structure. Physical pieces of Boblo remain, but the most complete version of the park now exists in people's memories. Boblo Island teaches us something important about the places we lose. People don't simply miss a roller coaster. They miss the person they rode it with. They miss the age they were. They miss the sound of the boat whistle, the wind across the upper deck, and the feeling that an entire summer was still ahead of them. That is why places matter. They hold versions of us that we can never completely return to. Boblo began as a place. It became a memory. And now comes the move. What do we do with what remains? Do we preserve the surviving buildings? Can one of the boats ever carry passengers again? Can photographs, home movies, and personal stories become a permanent Boblo archive? And perhaps, most importantly, what places are we taking for granted today because we assume that they'll always be here? Boblo survived in Detroit's life for nearly a century. But survival is never automatic. A place lasts only as long as someone is willing to maintain it, fight for it, or at the very least, remember it honestly. So tell us your Boblo story below. Tell us the year, the boat, the ride, and the person that you still associate with that day. Because Boblo Island may no longer be Detroit's summer playground. But every time one of those stories is shared, the island comes back to life. I'm Chris Hubble. This is Streets of History. And this is what we keep.